Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
Located on Lake Pontchartrain, Brisbee's Lakefront Restaurant and Bar offers traditional West End favorites, a scenic view, oysters, and numerous tasty options. More information is available at 504-304-4125 or brisbeesrestaurant.com. Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House has been shucking here since 1979. Located at 3117 21st Street in Metairie, Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House offers raw, fried, and grilled oysters as well as a range of Cajun and Creole dishes. Enjoy a dozen with a smile. Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is the first place award winner of the 2015 New Orleans Press Club's Excellence in Journalism Award for the category of Best TV Sports Show.
Good evening, New Orleans, and welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports, our last show of 2016. And of course, tonight we'll talk a lot about what's going on with the New Orleans Saints. We'll touch on the LSU Tigers as well. Joining me on the program, great friend of mine, great friend of this show, and a fantastic columnist for Noel.com and the Times-Picayune. He's the Saints columnist for that publication. Larry Holder joins us on the program. Larry, welcome to the show. As always, my friend, thanks for being with us tonight.
Hey, I'm not known for tooting my own horn. I would never do that, Eric, but what a better way for the year-end show for me to be
there
on.
you go.
I'm just going to say, I've never, but me,
Well,
I'm very humble.
Humble as they come.
Humble as they
Bama
come.
bangs and all.
No kidding.
Yeah, no
They're in
doubt.
effect.
Yes, indeed. Well, I'll tell you what, a lot to talk about when you talk about the Saints and LSU. And let's start off with again, before we do that, tell the folks a little bit about what's going on at the Times-Picayune, because you guys, when I had Jeff Duncan on the program earlier today, and the Dat Chat is on fire.
Right, yeah. It's really kind of exploded. It's our weekly podcast that we do. And it's unlike radio. It's an hour long,
Right.
No commercials, and it's all interaction within our comment stream and via Facebook Live. And it's really kind of blown up. And what we're doing the last couple of years, we've done it during the season. Now we're going to extend it, so it's going to be going on in the off-season. And, of course, a lot of hot topics in the off-season. So we got our Dad Chat podcast, and that's weekly, every Tuesday at 3 p.m. But, of course, look, all 365, 366 on a leap year, Saints coverage, Noel.com and the Times-Picayune. We do it broad brush, micro brush.
Yes.
We do it all. And personally, I think we do it the best.
And there's no offseason anymore.
No,
There really isn't.
absolutely not.
I mean, you might get maybe a couple of weeks in between the season, if you're not in the playoffs. But then, you turn it around. You got the Senior Bowl, and then you got to start free agency and the draft. So there's really no offseason in the NFL anymore.
Really, the only offseason in the NFL is between the end of OTAs or a mini camp
Right.
and the beginning of training camp, and that's from mid-June to late July.
Right.
And I know what's one of the topics we're going to talk about. We may be busy after Week 17. I'm curious to see what happens with the Saints.
Well, let's start with, again, the big rumor out there. Sean Payton to Los Angeles, to the Rams. This was brought up by Jason La Canfora. It was thrown out there saying that the Saints management would take less this year than they were asking for Payton last year. You and I have talked about this on the radio show. I'm of the opinion this came from the Payton camp. I don't see any reason for Mickey Loomis to leak something like that. Mickey Loomis can pick up a phone call and call a general manager or the president of a club or an owner and say, hey, Sean Payton's available. Would you have an interest? He doesn't need to leak that to the media. I think that came out of Payton's camp. But you're interesting. You've been all over this story. Talk a little bit about your thoughts on this story, how realistic you think it is, and where you think it's coming from.
Look, I do think it's very realistic. For anyone to kind of bury their head in the sand in this, it's almost like first time shame on you, next time shame on me. It was real last offseason. It's out there by design to make a real interest for Sean Payton this offseason. And I think sometimes people look at it, especially this season, to where maybe it's not as real because we kind of haven't been beaten over the head with it, like we were last season when you heard it for months.
Yes.
This all of a sudden popped up when the Rams job opened. And it's by design. It's not when the Jacksonville Jaguars job opened. It's not when the Buffalo Bills job opened. It's when the Rams job opened. Why? It's Los Angeles. Big market, young quarterback, some pieces on defense. Sean Payton would be very interested in going to Los Angeles, being a star in a giant town. And look, anyone watching has to know he's got the alpha personality, and he would love to be the alpha in one of the most alpha towns in the country, in the world, Los Angeles. So that's one thing that he's interested in. And honestly, you asked where it came from.
Yes.
It came from the same place it came from last time. This is how it works. If you want to go somewhere else, whether you're a coach, whether you're a player, it's a back channel deal. I can ask Sean Payton on the record a million times, what do you think? He's got it deflected. Same thing as Chris Paul. Remember that
Yes.
a few years ago?
Sure.
Where the back channels come from, it's agents, it's people who are friends with that person, whether it's Chris Paul, Sean Payton, giving the info out, put it out there on purpose to let everyone know, hey, I'm on the market, come make an offer. And I can tell you this, when the Rams job opened up, and actually my colleague, Jeff Duncan, who you just brought up, he heard during the owners' meetings, there was an owners' meetings during that span.
Yes.
That was the talk of the owners' meetings. And all of a sudden, Sean Payton's available again. That's by design. So every GM hears, so every owner hears. And Jason La Canfora comes out with that report on a Sunday. Jeff heard it in the middle of the week. And it's actually something we brought up during the Chat podcast that week. And it's potentially real. Now, is he going to leave? Who knows? But is he going to take offers? Yeah. And one of the things that Ian Rappaport brought up on NFL Network, that the Saints are kind of growing weary of this. Is Sean going to stay? Is Sean going to go? We just gave him a contract through 2020. I believe that they are probably tired of dealing with this. And it's not something to where the Saints want Sean to go. But Sean just might want to get out. He might see this as a second chance of getting out. Bill Parcells, his mentor, was huge on getting out a year early. And this might be Sean's second opportunity to maybe get out a year early.
Yes.
And so it's a lot of layers, a lot of what ifs, but the fact that the story's out there again, do not discount it at all. It's a real possibility. Not just with the Rams, but maybe some other teams.
Well, let's talk about those other teams, because you mentioned Jacksonville is probably not in the mix here.
No.
Buffalo's not in the mix here. But there are two other West Coast teams that might be intriguing.
Yeah, I would look at the potential if/when, it's more when, the Chargers moved to Los Angeles. They moved there. They could easily fire Mike McCoy. And you got two LA jobs that are open. Both are in an arms race for the market. Both have to make a pop. And both need a big-time head coach. And when I mean big-time head coach, it's got to be a guy with a Super Bowl.
Yes.
And so that matters. And I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if, say, Bruce Arians, look, he's had some health issues. If he is someone who decides to take a step back, that maybe Sean's kind of interested in looking there as well. So it's not just the Rams. I would look around the landscape. And let's also not kid ourselves. Indianapolis was the job that Sean wanted last year. Remember all the reports that Chuck Pagano was going to be fired?
Right.
Well, guess what? They waited to give Chuck Pagano a contract after they talked to Sean. Remember, 10 o'clock at night, they said, Chuck Pagano's coming back. He's got a 4-year deal. It's late Monday night. Why is it late Monday night? And why didn't they fire him at the beginning of the day? Because there were conversations. Then, after that, Sean Payton had some interest with the 49ers. They were hot and heavy on Sean. And Sean took a step back and said, no, that's not what I want to do. And so that's when he comes out on a Wednesday and says, man, I love me some potholes.
Right.
I love me some New Orleans. And I got a fat new contract, and I'm going to be here till 2020. Well, guess what? Don't hold your breath on him staying put, or at least don't hold your breath on him not exploring other opportunities, because it seems highly likely that he's going to want to do that again.
Larry, well, right now with the New Orleans Saints, he has full autonomy. He really doesn't have a boss. I mean, he calls the shots when it comes to the football side of the Saints organization. I would expect if he would go anywhere, he would demand full autonomy. Would you agree with that? Or do you think he would take a lesser role with maybe a stronger general manager just to be able to be in a market like Los Angeles?
I don't know if he has full autonomy with the Saints. I wouldn't necessarily buy into that. He has a lot of autonomy, but does he have full autonomy? No. And I do think over the last few years, when you work together, I do think there's some friction with Sean Payton and Mickey Loomis. And that was kind of one of the reported things during last season, where Sean might want to go, and there was some friction. They had to hash some things out. Sean, it's hard to work with him every day because he's so boom, 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 boom in your face. And Mickey isn't some big-time in-your-face guy. He's just not. But Mickey's a sharp guy. Does he know player personnel, this, that, the other? No, but he leans on these other people, but Sean is very much in his face. I know there are deals that either Sean didn't agree with what Mickey did, and Mickey didn't agree what Sean really wanted, but they relent, and sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. And I do think, though, you look at the Rams job, and you look at some of the reporting that's been out there, that John Gruden is probably number one on their list, but he wants full autonomy.
Yes.
And it doesn't seem like, from what I understand, that the Rams are going to be willing to give that, because Les Snead, their general manager, seems to be involved in what's going to happen. Now, that can change.
Yes.
If someone like John Gruden walks in and says, nope, Les Snead's got to go, or Sean Payton says, nope, Les Snead's got to go, then maybe that can happen. But to me, you got to have someone in there to at least kind of check Sean Payton a little bit. But you never know. If you need a big-time guy, they might make concessions. And it's an interesting, curious, I'd say next week, that it's going to happen here in New Orleans.
Right. Interesting, last year, Indianapolis, big-time quarterback. You look at the Los Angeles Rams job, young and up-and-coming quarterback that has a lot of upside. I got to believe that's got to be one of the things. If he is truly flirting with another team, they've got to have that in place already.
No question. And that's why the Rams job, to me, is probably the number one spot on the hierarchy. Look, I mentioned the Chargers. They do have Phillip Rivers. He's on the back end of his career.
Absolutely.
Carson Palmer, absolutely on the back end of his career. I think that, look, the Arizona thing is just, if something happens, maybe he's interested. I don't think that's viable. I do think the two LA jobs are viable, but the Rams job is more viable. Because, look, the Saints and Sean Payton heavily scouted Jared Goff last offseason during the draft process, and they were looking heavily at quarterback. They looked at Goff. They looked at Paxton Lynch. Even though it didn't get out in the news, I'm sure they looked at Carson Wentz. They looked at a whole bunch of other quarterbacks, and Sean Payton is definitely familiar with Goff. And it's something to where he probably can go in and you heard the knock on the Rams offense. Todd Gurley's calling it a middle school offense. Well, guess what? Sean Payton comes in. Even the pieces they have, it's not going to be a middle school offense. It'll be certainly vastly different. How much does he trust Goff? I think that's a question. But I think anything with a quarterback he finds potential in, it's something he's going to want to be interested. That's why last offseason, even though Indy is not some gigantic market, having Andrew Luck and tutoring him, that's a big selling point.
What do you think the compensation would be? One of the reports was the Saints would be interested in taking less. That is a public relations nightmare, whether this city has maybe tired a little bit of Sean Payton or not. They're going to expect a John Gruden type deal. Now, I don't know if that's realistic in today's NFL, a John Gruden type deal, But they're going to be, the fan base would expect some type of real compensation if ultimately their Super Bowl coach under contract, who just got an extension, would go elsewhere.
Well, I think the fan base better temper their expectations. And that's goes right along the lines of the talk that we heard leading up to all these big reports. It's the same thing, that they would take less. And I think part of it is that they don't want to get nothing for Sean Payton, but they'd like to get something, and there might be a mutual agreement. All right, it's run its course, kind of like what happened with Andy Reid and the Eagles. It's run its course. Let's go a different direction. You go your way, we go ours. Everything was awesome when we were here, but we got to move on. And so I would, honestly, if I'm going to guess, I'd say a mid-round pick.
Wow, really?
I mean, you get something.
You talk to people on the street who were looking at this very closely last year. They were asking, or at least thinking, that the Saints would get multiple number one picks.
Right.
And you're saying mid-round pick.
Well, I think that's what the Saints were looking for last year.
Right.
And that's why the Indy deal probably didn't happen. And it's a double-edged sword for Sean Payton. You're going somewhere and you lose a bunch of picks. It's a tricky negotiation.
Sure.
So I think that you look at the scenarios, and if Sean Payton wants to go somewhere and they want to have basically a mutual parting, just give us being the Saints something, and we'll move on. We don't have to pay the next head coach, $8-9 million a year, and we'll get someone else and figure it out. But it's something where it's tricky. But the price is significantly lower than it was last year, and I do think, look, third round pick maybe. It doesn't sound like much, but it's something. And the Saints get out from under the contract, and you kind of move on to a new phase. And I'll throw another stat out there in my column. I just put out there my 1st and 10 weekly column I do on Thursdays. That my discouraging stat of the week is that if the Saints finish with a losing record this year, 7-9, if they lose against Atlanta on Sunday, there'll have been 3 years of losing seasons. Last time that happened was every year Ditka was there. That just shows you how far it's fallen.
Yes.
And that's for a team that's had a Hall of Fame quarterback, a coach that's been great. The fact that it falls, it's not acceptable anymore in New Orleans.
Right. You've mentioned compensation. I'm talking about Peyton's compensation for a couple times tonight on the program. Have the Saints tired of paying $8-9 million a year for a head coach that's not getting to the playoffs or not getting to the Super Bowl? Is that a real factor in this, in your mind?
I would assume it is. Look, Tom Benson, while he's been very generous with his money, especially post-Katrina, been very generous with his money, he's not going to want to keep paying Sean Payton like he's the highest paid head coach if you're not getting highest paid results. I mean, that's just a fact. And he's getting paid like Bill Belichick, and it's not producing.
Right.
And you look at some of the other factors that, like Sean Payton is not exactly the easiest guy to deal with. Again, alpha guy, and it could be wearing on, especially someone like Mickey Loomis. I mean, look, they work with each other every day. It's not like he goes in and he's probably wearing on Tom Benson, but still, it's something to where, if you're not getting the results, Tom Benson doesn't want to keep paying the money. I don't care how much money he's got, and I don't care how much money he's willing to give to charities. Look, this is a business. It's not a charitable donation. So I do think that that's part of that. And if you can get a coach you feel good about, and if Sean wants to go and the money matches up to where you can spend a little less and get out from under that contract, maybe the Saints are willing to kind of turn that corner. Even if it is 1 or 2 more years with Drew Brees, you start to try to turn that corner with someone else.
Yeah. Last year,
coach-wise.
Right. Well, last year when these rumors cropped up, there was a lot of talk about Peyton 2.0, going and getting a Peyton disciple to come in and run the team. Where do you think they go in terms of a head coach if ultimately there is a deal made, Sean Payton forces his way out, goes to Los Angeles? Is it a Dennis Allen? Is it a former Peyton protege that's brought in? I mean, that's who these guys know. Or do they go outside the box and try to start off new?
I'm not sure they go too far outside the box. You bring up Dennis Allen. To me, I know it feels like an Ed Ogeron type of thing, and I'm
right.
sure fans might see it the same way. And it's not like Dennis Allen had a ton of success in Oakland. But Oakland, the vast majority of the times, are where coaches go to die, and
Sure.
they got to figure it out later. But I do think that they would look heavily at Dennis Allen. They know Dennis. He's turned this defense on a corner with a bunch of cast-offs
No
and
doubt.
guys off the street, and I think he's done a really good job with that. And if I'm the Saints, if I'm going to go that route, you make sure you keep Pete Carmichael, and you have money to, you could basically pay Dennis and Carmichael what you pay Sean.
Yes.
And you guarantee Pete stays, and Dennis is well compensated for what he does, given his resume. So, but do they have to interview other people? Absolutely. But I do think he's a heavy candidate. And to me, I don't think it would be a bad deal if that was the case. I look at it differently from maybe what an Ed Ogeron is. You struck out on these big-time guys. Look, if Dennis can make the defense work, he brings in kind of a guy he knows to be the defensive coordinator. And you have Pete Carmichael, who I don't think he would want to go with Sean Payton wherever he's going. Family's here. He's been here for a long time. And Pete can get out of the shadow of Sean Payton and kind of be his own guy and call the defense. I think that's the offense. I think that's something that would be attractive to him as well.
Now, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this later on in the program, but Ireland and Fontenot have done a nice job this year in restocking this roster. In season, bringing in guys off the street that really they've been plugged in and played. You look at the situation with the draft. It's the best draft probably since '06. If there is a opportunity for Peyton to move on, do they go out and get a strong football general manager in your mind, or one of these two guys, or both of these guys, are they the brain trust now in terms of personnel?
I'm curious to see how that pans out, because I can understand the logic of them trying to put someone in place, maybe moving Mickey Loomis up, because at some point, when Tom Benson dies,
Yes.
and if everything goes to the plan that Tom Benson wants, Gail would be in charge, or the owner, and you'd have Dennis Lausch and Mickey Loomis, and they would be more overseers than anything else. Could I see that? Sure, but I don't know if that's going to happen for a fact. Could they look outside the building? Maybe. Look, if maybe in a year or two, if things don't pan out for Ryan Pace in Chicago, would they want him to come back? Possibly, sure, but it's something they have to visit, because the personnel issues have been a problem. It seems like they're starting to get back on track, and yet it's still not good enough yet. So where do they go? What do they do? What do they want to do with Mickey Loomis? I'm curious to see how that structure turns out. I don't know if something happens now. It could, but it's something they probably have to visit.
See, what worries me when I look at this situation? It's that in a lot of cases, it sounds like they're going to go with someone. If this was to happen, they're going to go with someone they feel comfortable with, someone they know. And in a lot of cases, that means protege or Peyton or someone that has been within the organization at one time and moved on. And in a lot of cases, maybe that's not the right thing to do. Maybe sometimes you need to blow this thing up, get some fresh eyes on this thing, and it'll be interesting to see how that kind of works itself out. Do you see this ultimately being a situation where they feel comfortable with somebody they've worked with before, they know the person, has been in the building, that they've grown up in that building in some cases, that would be the preference over bringing in somebody from the outside with maybe fresh eyes to be able to take a hard look at this franchise?
Well, I think it depends on what department you're talking about. If Mickey moves up and they want to go get a GM,
right,
maybe they do look more outside the building. And a head coach, look, Mickey Loomis probably didn't know Sean Payton very well when they hired him, and he's the guy chiefly responsible for getting Sean Payton in the building and hiring him. So do they go that route? I think it depends. I think they're going to look. Let's look at Dennis Allen. They might look at Pete Carmichael. I don't know. Again, all of this is hypothetical if Sean leaves. But do they look outside the building? A, they have to because of the Rooney Rule. So
Right.
they have to look at a minority
At least one
candidate.
minority candidate, right?
And there are plenty of suitable people out there. And so it's not like it's something they just have to do.
Right.
But it's something to where they have to weigh it. Do they feel like someone comes in with a good vision that could be better than Dennis Allen? And yet Dennis Allen, he's been in here for a year and a half. Well, a year and a half as defensive coordinator solely. 2 years back with the Saints, but he was kind of a coach on the ascending track. And do I think they trust Dennis? I think they would. So that's why I think he would be one of the top candidates. But do you have to do yourself the due diligence to look outside the building? I don't know. Let me just throw out some names. I don't know. Josh McDaniels, Kyle Shanahan. Who knows? David Shaw from Stanford. I don't know.
Right.
But they have to do their due diligence to at least look at that route. And yet, do I feel like they would prefer someone they know and trusted? I think they would prefer that route.
Do you see a scenario, and of course this is hypothetical, where Peyton stays, Loomis ultimately is moved up to oversee both the Pelicans and the Saints, maybe more as a president of both clubs role, and a strong GM comes in and has his hands not only in the day-to-day operations, but in personnel. Do you see Sean Payton living under that scenario here in New Orleans?
I think part of that may be one of the reasons why he might be looking elsewhere. I don't know if he could,
right?
Honestly, because if you're going to get a new, straight-up GM, they're going to want to come in and put their stamp on the team.
Right. They want their guy.
Absolutely. And it's not just maybe their guy, because Sean Payton is still one of the most respected coaches in the NFL. And again, this isn't the Saints wanting to get rid of Sean Payton. It's Sean Payton maybe wanting to go somewhere else.
Right.
That's the key in this. But I do think that if you're going to go out and get a GM, you better get a strong one. Don't go out and get someone who's never done it before or doesn't know how to deal with Sean Payton or someone like that. So I think that's part of one of the things that Sean's looking at. If they do that, do I want to be involved in this? And, of course, the Breeze factor. Do I want to pass up on a Los Angeles job that might not be open in the next 4 or 5 years and stay with Drew Brees 1 more year, 2 more years? I don't know. It's all these variables that are floating out there, and something that I know everyone involved is going to have to visit, except really for Drew Brees. He's going to be kind of stuck with whatever happens to him.
That was going to be my next question, because Brees and Peyton have been kind of tied at the hip here in New Orleans, and we've always heard, they're going to ride off in the sunset together. If Peyton was to force his way out to a Los Angeles job, what does that mean for Drew Brees, who really has only 1 more year left on his contract? Is that a situation where this team says, you know what, we're probably better off trying to trade Drew Brees, getting compensation for Drew Brees? Or do they try to ride Drew Brees now with maybe this young team that they're trying to put together as they rebuild?
If Sean leaves, I think they just ride with Drew Brees. I don't think there's any question about that. And Drew Brees has a no trade clause in his contract. He'd have to waive it if he wanted to do it. I don't think he wants to do that. But guess what? It's kind of funny. Drew Brees talks about, the speculation last year, I didn't buy it. He's lying through his teeth. He knows that Sean was willing to walk out the door and be like, good talk, Drew. We had a good run. I'm out. It's the nature of the business. It happens.
Sure.
So any of this stuff, I don't buy the speculation. It's all nonsense. He knows it's real speculation on purpose because Sean's trying to get his name out there again.
Right.
He's no dummy, and he's got to say what he's got to say, but,
Sure.
but it's nonsense.
But Larry, basically, Drew Brees is on a 1-year deal.
Right.
Do you take a chance if you're bringing in a new coach, if that ultimately does happen, all this is speculation at this point, and not get compensation for a guy that's got a few more years left? Now, you could probably ride him, and maybe you become a playoff team. Maybe you got a chance at another Super Bowl down the line. When is that happening? Is that happening in 2 years from now, in 3 years from now? How is he playing in 2 to 3 years from now? He's playing well right now. There's been no real drop-off. But again, this is a guy that is still one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL, and we would demand real compensation on the open market if he was a free agent. And if the Saints were to make a move one way or the other, they could probably get something for. I'm not saying they get a Herschel Walker deal, but they would get a nice package probably for a Drew Brees if ultimately he would waive that clause and allow himself to be moved.
If Sean Payton would leave, I bet you the question you just asked, what do you do with Drew Brees? How do you handle Drew Brees? Is the number one question for the coaching candidate that comes in. And if it links in with what the front office wants to do, they'll be in good shape. If it doesn't, they'll be out. Nice to see you. I hope you enjoyed your good dinner at one of our fine restaurants in New Orleans, and we'll call you.
Yeah.
And the call never happens. So I do think that it depends on, honestly, how Drew Brees is still physically. Obviously, he's producing.
Yes.
So there's no question the Saints want him next year. So, if this happens now, I would assume the Saints say, you got to ride with Drew Brees one more year. You might have to ride with him 2 and maybe 3. It depends on, look at Tom Brady. He's still riding.
Right.
Drew's still riding. And who would be better out there at this point for us to try to win games now? No one exists.
No one.
That you could be able to go out and get.
You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports each and every Thursday night with our live broadcast right here on WLAE, 6 p.m. On Friday, you catch us here on WLAE at 10 p.m. and also on Pelican Sports Television that is in the New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Lafayette markets. That's 9 o'clock every Friday night. Larry Holder, Saints columnist for the New Orleans Times-Picayune, and NOLA.com is our guest. I'm your host, Eric Asher. We'll be right back after these messages.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Amco Fence, locally owned and operated since 1976. Fully licensed and insured and a member of the BBB, Amco serves both residential and commercial customers. If you're looking to repair, replace, or install a fence for security or aesthetic reasons, Amco Fence supplies wooden, metal, chain link, vinyl, and ornamental or automatic gates. Amco aims to satisfy your fencing needs. Amco Fence, 504-468-9559 or AmcoFenceCompany.com.
TikTok Cafe, located on Causeway South at the I-10 in Metairie, is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Our menu offers breakfast dishes like our Western omelet made from scratch biscuits, grits, egg sunny side up, and lunch specials like our homemade cheeseburgers with a side of golden brown fries. Don't forget about our weekday lunch special and that every Tuesday is steak night. TikTok Cafe, open 24/7 at Causeway South at the I-10 in Metairie.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Tonight, Larry Holder of NOLA.com is our guest. Larry, we were talking about this in the break, and this will be the last question about Sean Payton. To me, it's playoffs or bust next year. For a guy that would be considered lame duck going into the season, maybe the Los Angeles job or another job would be more intriguing for a guy like that. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that the fact that the Rams job popped up, it's Los Angeles, that is the reason why there is an intrigue from Sean Payton to be interested in it, to look at it, to possibly want it, and to go after it. And you look at it, last year was a chance to get out maybe a year or two early. It's a second chance possibly for him to get out a year early to kind of follow in the footsteps of Bill Parcells, also Bill Walsh. He was very much at, boy, you hit 10 years in a head coaching job, you've run your course. It's just kind of what it is. And now that's even way back when you had the same players and that sort of thing. So it's a different era, but same mantra. And so I do think that Sean's looking at it this way. What if I only get 1 or 2 years of Drew Brees, and if it's 2017 or bust, if they go 4 years in a row and it's mediocre, you blow it up and you got to start over from scratch to build it back up. Sean would, in his mind, possibly miss out on an opportunity to get out and start something fresh because he doesn't know when these opportunities are going to come up. So I understand where I understand completely where Sean Payton's coming from in this. If you've been in a job for 10, 11 years, 1 year you had to sit out.
Sure.
But if you're in a job for that long, do you want to have a new challenge? Do you want to be in a new place? It's natural. I understand it. That's why for everything I've written about, it's not like, oh, Sean Payton, you shouldn't be doing this. No, it's natural. It's understandable for this. It was understandable last offseason. It's more understandable this offseason to where you stay put. And I don't care how long your contract is. The fact you stayed put and it's kind of still status quo, I don't knock him at all for possibly wanting to go and look at another venture somewhere else and start from scratch and kind of rebuild something.
Yes. Well, we saw the same thing, different circumstance with Jim Mora as well. Mora got to around his 10th year. Things weren't going well. The team was on a downslide. And that, he kind of threw up his hands and said, enough, and moved on. And, of course, ended up getting in Indianapolis, kind of turned that franchise around. But, we've seen it here in New Orleans.
Well, it's funny, let me interrupt you, because Jim Mora, when he quit, I can tell you, I talked to Tom Benson at length up in the Greenbrier during training camp. And when he said, I was doing a bunch of historical stuff, and I asked him about Jim Mora, this, that, and the other, and he said, when Jim Mora quit, he said, what are you doing? You still got football games to coach. It wasn't like he was ready to go fire Jim Mora,
right,
even though they went 2-6. So the Saints aren't firing Sean Payton.
Right.
It's if you get tired of it, you want to go do something else, it's understandable. It's natural.
Critique this front office this year, the personnel department, and how they've done. Because I didn't anticipate this team being that good of a team when I saw the original roster, but the free agents for the most part have panned out, with the exception of maybe Kobe Fleener, who again is maybe a little bit overpaid for what his production is. You look at what they've been able to do in terms of pro personnel, plugging guys in all season long. I mean, Sterling Moore, B.W. Webb, come on, man. Those guys were on the street. All of a sudden, they're serviceable in that defensive backfield. The draft, as we talked about a little earlier, probably the best draft they've had since 2006. What's changed there, if anything? What do you think about what's going on in that front office when it comes to personnel?
I don't know if anything has changed, like a philosophy or anything like that.
Is it new eyes, new voice? Is Ireland coming in? Has it made that much of a difference in your mind?
Well, people would probably wonder, well, why is it so good in 2016 and it wasn't as good in 2015, even though it looked good, and then all of a sudden it hasn't been as good. So I don't know if it's I think they just got them right. Sometimes you get them right and sometimes you don't. I mean, let's be really honest. And you could say, even way back when you brought up 2006, okay, that draft looked great. Well, you draft 2007, Robert Meacham. He's just so whatever. You could sometimes you get them right, sometimes you don't. So I don't think it was some giant philosophical change from 15 to 16. But I do think that they just smartly went after players that were intelligent, that played in big-time programs. I think that helped. You look at their top 3 picks. Rankins was kind of a no-brainer. They played Michael Thomas, Von Bell from Ohio State.
Right.
Look how many people got drafted from Ohio State.
Sure.
That's not on accident because they're a good team. Was it a flyer on David Onyemata? Yes. But a team like Green Bay was hot after him. That's why they traded up to go get him. And so I just think sometimes you hit and sometimes you don't. Now, here we go. What if we come back a year from now and Von Bell's getting beat everywhere and Michael Thomas can't catch the football anymore? We're back in the same conversation as Stephon Anthony and Haley Kikaha, or one of these guys gets hurt. I mean, we're in the same conversation. It's kind of that it's weird. I do think that it's not like there was this giant philosophical change. Now, you bring up free agency. I would say Kobe Fleener, obviously that wasn't going to work out. James Laurinaitis, probably not the best move. But what they were is they had to spend more wisely. I think you look at last offseason, Brandon Browner, that was a bargain in the cornerback market. $5 million a year was a bargain.
Yeah, but it was a bad bargain.
Of course, but that's when you're there, you gotta, and you're bargain hunting and bargain hunting is $5 million, and that's what buys you Brandon Browner.
Right.
That's where you.
But they were bargain hunting this year with Fairley.
Well, that's the thing. They were smarter with that. They didn't spend $5 million a year, and they didn't give Nick Fairley guaranteed money, and Brandon Browner's not going to run off and say, "Oh, I'm just running away with my money." Ha 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 ha. But they had to spend smarter. Like they had to spend and give Fairley a prove-it deal, and they gave Craig Robertson not a big deal, but it was a smart move.
Right.
Even Nate Stupar,
right.
A smarter deal. Even you look at some of the deals they did, it didn't pan out because they got hurt. I think Michael Ho'omanu on IR all year,
right.
but that was a smart move. Now, Josh Hill didn't look like it was that smart,
right.
but when he was in there, he was a good player.
He played well.
Right, exactly. So I do think that they made some good moves, and you bring up Sterling Moore and B.W. Webb. Imagine if they don't have those guys.
Oh, my gosh.
If they just pluck some other guys, they might be 4 wins right now, 3 wins.
And even the undrafted free agents, you look at that defensive backfield, there are some young players at the cornerback position that you look at them right now and you say they have potential to be pretty good players in the NFL.
Yeah, I'm curious to see. Ken Crawley has some work to do.
Right.
He had a knee injury actually this week in practice. He's going to miss his last game and need some time to rehab. Devontae Moore, he looked good, and then once you put him in front of the live bullets, he did not look that good against the Giants. That's why his role's kind of been diminished. But do they give them a shot? Yeah. But it's a big-time question mark, though, at cornerback. All of these cornerbacks that you had going in from training camp into the season all got injured. None of them are active. People are cut. Look, Kyle Wilson cut off IR. Keenan Lewis cut. And then you got these young guys who you thought might be good. Can you trust them to be healthy?
Right.
Now you got P.J. Williams and Damian Swan with concussion issues.
Right.
And honestly, can Delvin Breaux come back and be the same guy? Right. We don't know that.
That's true.
Quarterback is a need, even though you got guys like Moore and B.W. Webb. You need to get better there. And they need to look at that position heavily this offseason, whether it's free agency or in the draft.
Some other needs, in your opinion, as they go into free agency in the draft?
How about an edge rusher?
I think a dynamic player on defense is the biggest need on this team.
Absolutely.
Okay, whether you got to have to spend money in free agency, and you really don't pan out getting that in a lot of cases, or you have to find one in the draft, even if maybe you have to move up to be able to get that player. They need that player on defense.
Absolutely need a pass rusher on the edge to complement Cam Jordan. Paul Kruger, Darryl Tapp, veterans. Serviceable, not your future. And you need someone there specifically. And it depends on what they do with Nick Fairley. Do they want to pay Nick Fairley?
Well, that's the next question. Look, he's a guy that in his past stops needed to be motivated. He was motivated this year. Now, you know, some will say he's been in the Deep South. He's close to his daughter in Mobile, Alabama. That's motivation for him. He likes to be in New Orleans because he's close to home, etc. But, you know, the almighty dollar is what these guys are playing for. Do you roll the dice? Do you pay him? Because he's going to get some looks on the open market now to hold on to him, hoping that you're going to get the same type of production next year and the year after that you got this year. It's a real roll of the dice.
Knowing Mickey Loomis and the way he deals with contracts, I bet he puts a number out there. If he wants more, if other teams are going to give him more, he'll let him walk. I think that's what's going to happen here. And would they miss him? Yes. But they're probably going to try to learn from the past, giving out some bad contracts to some of their own players, specifically Junior Gillette.
Yes.
Which they're finally out of cap hell from him.
Yes.
That's why they're going to have some cap space, but do they want to spend it differently? I think they want to sit at a number and see what happens. And if the market works, then they'll take him. It's kind of the same situation with Jermon Bushrod. Remember a few years ago?
Yes.
He was a left tackle, Pro Bowl, good guy, not with the same reputation that Nick Fairley had, but they stuck at a number. Chicago went over the number. They said, look, we'll figure it out. And that's what they did. And they haven't really missed Jermon Bushrod. But I think they sit at a number there. And I also think you mentioned what else do they do?
Yeah.
They have to look at they've got to get a guard somewhere. Does Jari Evans come back? Right. He might. He's played way better than I thought.
Sure.
But that other guard position, do they need an upgrade there? Absolutely. You only have one more year with Jari Evans. I'm sure you might have no more years. They might just move on.
And
there.
the same thing with Zach Strief, too. Both these guys are bookends there. Both guys playing together 11 years. I mean, you can't expect those guys to play at a high level for 1 or 2 more seasons. So you got to be ready. Is Landon Turner that guy? Is he a guy ultimately that can fit into one of those guard spots? He's been used as kind of that third tackle, like they've groomed Zach Strief and other guys in the past. Is he a guy on the come, or is he just a guy that really still has to prove himself?
Absolutely has to prove himself. It was good for him to make the roster, but he absolutely still needs to prove himself. And if they move on from Zach Strief, I think he's set to have a $5+ million cap number next year. Can they afford it? Sure. Does he help the locker room? Sure. Is he still playing at a good level?
Yeah.
Yes. But you have Andres Pete. What do you do with him? His natural spot is not at guard.
Right.
And at some point, you're going to have to get 2 guards. And how do they do it? I know last offseason they were trying to get into the guard market. They did not have the money to do it. And the offensive line was a huge concern, probably their biggest concern on the entire team going into this year. They're surprised at how well it panned out for them, but they know it needs to be addressed, and it's got to be addressed either or free agency and the draft.
Some other needs in your opinion?
I would look, I mentioned cornerback, I think linebacker, absolutely. Is Craig Robinson your future at middle linebacker? What do you do with Donnell Ellerby? Can you trust him? How are they going to play 3 safeties the whole time? So how do you handle linebacker? Again, and defensive tackle. What happens if Fairley moves on?
Right.
I think that's a position they're going to have to look at.
A lot of fans were thinking Jairus Byrd gone. Byrd has kind of turned it around this season. You look at the cap number next year as opposed to the final 2 years of the deal. Probably a guy that if you're looking to hold on to him, next year would be the year you hold on to him, hoping that he can duplicate what he's done in the second half of the season. What do you think happens with Byrd?
You only hold on to him if he takes a significant pay cut. His cap number next year is close to $12 million. There is no way on planet Earth, Pluto, Mystery Planet, Xenon, something from Star Wars, there's no way he's going to play for the Saints at that cap number. And do I think he's smart enough to take one? I think he is. Do I think the Saints kind of value what he does? I do. But how far is Byrd going to be willing to go? Because I don't think teams are going to be willing to pay him anywhere near what maybe he thinks. And if he drops from maybe 11.7, I think it is, to 2, 3, I think they might stick with him. But it also depends on, philosophically, what can they do, because they're forced to play 3 safeties because their linebacker position is in such shambles.
And remember, Vaccaro's a free agent, and you're going to have to try to make sure that you bring him back. I got to believe.
Well, Vaccaro, he's got 1 more year left on his deal because he does have the 5th-year extension. They did give him the 5th-year extension. So he's got a big base salary, but he is under 1 more year. And also, Brandon Cooks, they have to make a decision about that this offseason.
What do you think happens there?
I would think absolutely they give him the 5th-year extension. I don't think they trade him at all. I think that's something where you hear it. Saints have moved on with some guys. If someone blows them away from Brandon Cooks, maybe. But I think ultimately they feel like he's a playmaker and they'd like to ride him 2 more years for sure.
Let's head to the phone lines. 866-3200. Larry Holder is our guest. To Metairie and Tom. Tom, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Tom.
Hey, Eric. Hey, Larry. You guys are having a great show today. You're telling it like it is. That's why I watch your show every week. Back to one of the comments you guys made in the beginning. The Saints keep limping along. I mean, why wouldn't it be a good plan to get rid of Sean Payton and Breeze, get some good draft picks, and build a team like Dallas did? Dallas limped along for a while. Now look at their offensive line, a bunch of first-round draft picks. Get a bunch of people, or as many as you can, for those 2 guys. And I also want to put a shout out. I was at the game Saturday. I was watching Cam Jordan. That guy was playing like he was in the Super Bowl. He wore that right tackle out. And I really was kind of proud of those guys. Some of those guys are playing hard for really a losing season. But I want to see a comment again about trading, the coach and Breeze and rebuilding for 3 or 4 years. It may take that long. I'll hang up.
Thank you, Tom.
I just don't think you're going to get a lot of compensation. I know we talked about it in the last segment. I just don't think the compensation is going to be that high for Sean Payton. I said mid-round pick. I threw out there a third-round pick. That might be all it takes. But Drew Brees has a no-trade clause. He's got to waive that. I don't think he wants to waive it. So that's part of the issue there as well.
Well, then he controls where he goes as well.
Absolutely.
I mean, that no-trade clause, if you look at it from his standpoint, he can control where he wants to go now. They just can't send him to Buffalo, okay? He can control where he would like to go, and that's the ace in the hole for him if they ultimately want to move him. He now controls what team or what group of teams may be bidding on his services.
Yeah, if Cleveland calls, he's going to say no thanks.
Right.
Now, what if Denver calls?
There you go.
You never know.
Right, no doubt.
But that's right. That's kind of the key for him. Yeah. I just don't anticipate him wanting to uproot and go somewhere else. I mean, he'll be 38 in January. He's still playing at a great level. He loves the city. I mean, none of that is lip service. That's completely true. Right. Why would you want to go be Brett Favre and go try to uproot and go somewhere else? I just don't see it. So I think part of it, though, is if you want to start from scratch with another coach, that's why the Saints are kind of willing to let Sean go if he wants to go and just take something for him. So I do think that's part of the motivation for the Saints to let him explore his options and maybe start fresh. Now, look, the caller mentions, all right, it's going to take 3 or 4 years. How patient is this fan base going to be in 3 or 4 years? Right. That's not the nature of the NFL anymore.
Not anymore, and especially not this fan base anymore. This fan base is spoiled.
Right.
There's no doubt. This is not the fan base of the 70s, the 80s, or the 60s. I mean, this is a different fan base altogether.
Absolutely.
No doubt about it. Most underappreciated player in the NFL, I think, is Cam Jordan.
Cam Jordan, I was on your radio show last week, and you chuckled when I mentioned this line. I said, he's a stud, but he's not sexy. And Cam, I'm sorry, I don't know if you're going to take that well or not, because one's great and one's not.
Yeah.
But he does everything you want. Can he rush the passer? Yes. But does he need a Batman and a Robin?
Right.
Absolutely. That's why they need another edge guy. His best year was with Junior Gillette when he had someone capable. Now, is he a beast against a run? Absolutely. There's a reason why Pro Football Focus has graded him. He's the number 2 edge guy in the NFL, just under Khalil Mack, over Von Miller.
Right.
I mean, he has been phenomenal this year, and it's one of the reasons why you kind of have some hope for the defensive front. You got some good pieces there. Sheldon Rankins played well. It's been a difference when he's returned to the lineup and made his debut.
Absolutely.
Outside of that, but Cam Jordan has been phenomenal.
He really
no
has.
question.
To Lockport and Lisa. Lisa, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Lisa.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
I just want to say I love your show every Thursday night.
Thank you.
I'm glad to be on. My question is, what if Sean does go to the Rams? What do you think he's going to do with Greg Williams? I'll hang up and listen.
Thank you.
I think he goes there on purpose to fire
just to fire him?
And boom him and boom, 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 boom. And let's see, Jim Fossil's kid, or John Fossil's kid, Jim Fossil, is the interim coach. John Fossil demoted Sean Payton while with the Giants as offensive coordinator. He'll boom, 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 fire him too.
Right.
So, yeah, Greg Williams will be adios, muchacho.
Right.
See you later,
That's just a little lanyard.
See you later, my non-friend.
Yes, no doubt about
Absolutely.
it. To home and Greg. Greg, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Greg.
Hey, guys. I got a question and a comment. What's wrong with if Sean Payton does leave? I don't want any Sean Payton staff. Just go out like you did when you got Sean Payton in. You know, nobody knew who Sean Payton was. He was an offensive coordinator. He brought in his own people. So if you do let Sean go, let everybody go. Bring in a Kyle Shanahan. Bring in all of his people and start from fresh. And I'll just hang up and listen.
So you don't want any Payton disciples. Which again, some people, I mean, look, I criticized that last year when there was comments. Look, can you do better than Payton 2.0? I mean, let's open up the playing field here if that's actually going to happen.
For me, honestly, Dennis Allen Yeah, he's a Sean Payton disciple, but he's a different-minded coach. He's a defensive-minded coach. And what's wrong with the offense, honestly? Not much.
Right.
If you keep Pete Carmichael, what's wrong with that?
Right.
He's a proven guy.
Yes.
And wants to prove on his own. Drew Brees trusts him. If you're going to have Drew for a couple more years, this offense has been pretty good. Now, everywhere else, I'm sure Dennis would have, if he's the head coach, he would have the say-so to go do whatever he wants.
Yes. To Herm in New Orleans. Hey, Herm, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports.
How you doing, guys? Watch your show. I'm glad to watch your show whenever I see it on TV. I have a Saints question. I want the Saints draft players right now on backyard. I look at the Cowboys. They get a Lyle Collins the year before last for little or nothing. And then the Dak Prescott in the 4th round last year. You think Derrick Jones is just laughing under his breath at the Saints draft room?
Yeah.
Listen to what you have to say.
Thank you, Herm. Is that by design? I mean, Saints fans are upset. All these LSU players going to all these teams. I mean, what Daniil Hunter, when you look what he's doing with the Vikings, I mean, come on. You're an LSU alumni.
Yeah, the Daniil Hunter pick probably hurts because he's become a pretty good pass rusher.
Very good pass rusher.
No question. Deion Jones, too, who
Oh,
they're
yeah.
going to face
Come
on
on.
Sunday. He's been a stud, too. I get it. And yet, people like to throw out Lyle Collins. Well, he's not even starting. He's not starting for the Cowboys. He's not part of that, wow, that big push. No, he's not part of that. But why don't you just blame LSU for not getting Dak Prescott? How about that?
Right.
I think that's a bigger deal than anything else, honestly.
Hopefully there's not a repeat of that this time around with the kid from Landry Walker, that's for sure. Let's go to Toby in Gretna, our final call of the night. Toby, welcome.
Yeah, Eric, I was wondering if Sean Payton want to move, does he back down on having total control of the next team he goes to? I'll hang up, and thank you.
Thank you, Toby. We mentioned that in the first segment, but go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, I think that's probably part of the negotiating thing. I don't think he feels like he has to have total control because it's not been a formula for success in the NFL, honestly. I think he might be smart enough to know that you got to have a checks and balance. And that's more on the Rams, if that's the way it is. It looks like Les Snead's going to be involved in that, so I'm curious to see. But look, I think he wants to have a lot of control. And look, Chip Kelly went to San Francisco, and it seems like he's got a lot of control. Same thing in Philadelphia.
Right.
Didn't pan out for him totally.
15 seconds left this weekend, taking on the Atlanta Falcons, closing out the Georgia Dome for the regular season. How do you think these things do?
I think Atlanta's better than the previous teams they faced in the Georgia Dome. Even though the Saints play well in the Georgia Dome, I do think Atlanta gets the number 2 seed and beats the Saints, and they go 7-9 for the third straight year, 4-5,
which is not good.
No,
which is
not
not good.
No.
You're very good. Thank you, Larry Holder, for being
Thanks,
with us tonight here on Inside New Orleans Sports. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there's a rebroadcast of this program each and every Friday night right here on WLAE at 10 p.m. Also on Pelican Sports Television in the New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Lafayette markets. That's 9 p.m. on Friday. You can catch me on the radio, 990 a.m. WGSO. That's weekdays, 11 a.m. until 1 p.m. You can download the podcast or listen live at ericasher.com, and all the previous episodes of Inside New Orleans Sports can be seen at ericasher.com as well. Don't forget about that TuneIn Radio app. It's a great download for your smartphone or tablet, especially if you're out of the airwaves of WGSO 990 a.m. Also, want to thank Larry Holder, who does a great job with us all the time on the radio and TV show, and to the WLE production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Kenny Juno, Naila Jones, and my director extraordinaire, William Hill. Happy New Year, New Orleans. We'll see you next year with another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. Thanks for watching.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is the first place award winner of the 2015 New Orleans Press Club's Excellence in Journalism Award for the category of Best TV Sports Show.